on the agenda. In meeting with Jason and Pam, we decided that on each agenda, we're going to start identifying not necessarily the reason, but the intent of each agenda item. Given our discussion last time and some of the misunderstanding about, we came in thinking we were making a decision that night and it was for information and feedback. So we're going to start labeling each thing on the agenda to just say, like, tonight we have 2 items that are strictly for informational pieces. When there's something that we need to make a decision on, we'll mark that as such. And if there's things that that the district needs some feedback from, we'll mark it that way too. And then that way we know what we're heading into as far as, do I need to have all my ducks in a row to make a decision tonight? Or is this something simply for informational pieces as we move along? So hopefully that'll give some clarity as we continue and be able to move from there. So the next one, number 4, is distance learning survey. We had asked to see those results at our meeting. This survey was given out after the spring term just to see how it fared with everybody. So Jason and Pam, I think Pam, you're gonna take that over, or maybe you guys are gonna tag team it.
Yes, thank you. So as Meredith indicated, this was given in the spring after we were pretty well through the semester, closer to the end when we were starting the grading pieces. We had 1,009 parents complete the survey and 761 students complete it. And there was a separate, I should mention, it was a separate parent survey and a separate student survey sent out to all parents and sent out to all students. So that is what we got in terms of participation. We did want to give you a little bit of information about the demographics of the population. I know we've been having some conversations about taking a look at equity and some of the needs of our subgroups, and so we thought it would be a good idea for you to have some information about the respondents. So this is the breakdown of the parent respondents, and then this is the breakdown of the student respondents. And when we look at the demographics of our district, we can see that the student respondents are pretty similar to the demographics of our district. Jason's going to take us into the parent piece.
Thank you, Pam. And just a reminder that we really partnered with the same vendor that helps us with our staff, student, and parent engagement survey. So this survey was crafted by School Perceptions. They did the work of getting the survey out. They provided us a template of a survey. We reviewed and revised it with some teacher leaders, principals, and directors. We didn't change much, a couple questions. But those folks, our partners, really provided this. We did want to ask many of the same questions, which you probably saw as you reviewed the data. Many of the same questions we asked the parents and the students. So you'll see it's a nice comparison of data, perspectives from our parent group, and then perspectives from our student group. So looking at slide 7, the categories were kind of a check-in category, some technology pieces, and then some questions about content or curriculum. So the first couple slides under the parent perspective really look at kind of a check-in. And again, this is parents, all parents, asking how have you been dealing with distance learning? We purposefully left that pretty wide open. And we're seeing good to great is about 54%, 55%. Fair is around 34%, and then poor is right around 13% of respondents saying they're struggling with what distance learning is bringing to them. Slide 8 just asks about the navigation of the change to distant learning. And those slides really talk about maintaining a healthy work and life balance. And 65% of our respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they were able to maintain that healthy balance. So the 65% is, again, agreed or strongly agreed. And then 68.2, managing stress, again, strongly agreed or agreed that they were managing their stress well. And then 52.9 respondents are saying that agreed or strongly agreed that they're confident in their ability to support learning. Kathy. Thanks for joining us. The next slide, just some questions about how we describe our family. It's really that dynamic about availability to provide support, kind of just insights about the family dynamic more than anything. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that one. Slide 10 talks about, that's the transition from kind of a check-in to technology. And of the 1,000 respondents, or nearly 1,000 respondents, 96.3% said they had reliable access to internet or Wi-Fi. We did not ask, we did not delineate there whether it was district-supported Wi-Fi. As you know, we supported some Wi-Fi access. So we didn't ask that question, but reliable access, 96.3. We did ask about the primary device that the parent is using to support learning or the student is learning. So 87.9 said their primary device that they were using to support distance learning was the Chromebook, and 48.1 said that they're utilizing a district-owned device. So that parent was using the device to some degree. The next slide really talks about, again, under the technology category, the confidence level of the parent using technology. And 71%, again, is saying that they're very confident or confident in using the technology to support the learning. And then 66 talked about being very or confident in using that virtual meeting or classes. Most of our staff members were using Google Classroom, so that's really speaking to us. About 66% of parents said they were pretty confident, very confident or confident using kind of the Google Classroom platform. The next slide just talks about ability to support learning. Again, I think that data kind of reflects earlier slide where how are you feeling about distance learning? You know, we have a slightly higher percent agreeing or strongly agreeing that the school has been able to support the children during learning, during distance learning. Disagree was 19, and then strongly disagree about 6.5%. Next slide is that transition from technology now to content or curriculum. So we asked some questions about, you know, the level, amount of work, availability of materials, and so on. And those numbers represent highly satisfied or satisfied. So we asked questions around how do you feel about the amount of work that's being provided? So again, just an example, I won't read all these to you, but for that category, 66.3% of parents, this is just parents again, that were highly satisfied or satisfied. We did see, I think Pam will cover our student survey data next here, but we did see the amount of interaction with class was a target area in both our parent group and our student group. So we know that one-on-one support was okay, small group interaction was okay, but we saw a dip in that data when it talked about interaction with the whole class. So that's something we've had some conversations about. The next slide again was content around that category, really talking about communication. Procedures surrounding distance learning clearly communicated. Again, parent group, 79.2. Questions regarding I know who to contact, 77. And these are, again, are agreed or strongly agreed. District staff respond to my questions. So these are numbers that, again, are agreed or strongly agreed around communication from a district level, school level, and then who do I know to contact. So I'd like to take a break there before I turn it back over to Pam. Any questions specific to the parent categories?
Jason, and it's because I don't really know, and I'm just kind of questioning how actually does it look when when the kids are online, with the online learning? Do you have a whole group of them on at the same time, or I just am not clear on that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it varies, and it varies by grade level, it varies by content, and it varies by schedule. So I'll give you a couple of examples just to give you the picture. So from grades 1 through 6, for example, 1 through 5, I'm sorry, ELA, we identified teacher leaders at each of those grade bands to videotape a ELA mini lesson. So for example, we had a first grade teacher at Madison Elementary that throughout distance learning every day created a mini lesson video for ELA that was then shared by the teacher of record across first grade across the district.
Okay.
And the rationale was we wanted our professionals to spend time providing feedback to students, meeting in small groups, meeting one-to-one, meeting in large groups, and not to do all the work planning, spending the majority of time planning. So in that example, first grade teachers would be meeting with those small groups one-on-one and some large groups. I think that varies or is different at the high school level. At a high school geometry class, for example, you may have times where the entire class is hearing some direct instruction, and then the follow-up is subsequent after questions are answered and homework is assigned. So it really varies by content and grade band.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions directly around the parent survey before we turn it back over to Pam? All right, thank you.
Okay, from the student perspective, the student survey follows very much the same format as the parent. So we start out with the overall experience, and here you can see that about 54.5% of the students felt good or, great about the experience and learning through a distance format. We do have a culmination of kids here at the good to fair, where the majority of the kids are. There's about 68.9 that fell between the good and fair. And so that's something that we have talked about in terms of how do we just make sure that we're tuning into that student experience. And again, I think Jason alluded to one factor in terms of interaction with the class. Similar question to the parents, how did they do with navigating the change to distance learning? And 69.8% of students said they were able to maintain a healthy work-school life balance. And again, that's the percentage of students that said they strongly agree with that statement. And then managing stress, 59.6% of students said that they felt as though they were managing their stress adequately during that change to distance learning. Feeling supported. As you take a look at this, you can see that 25.6% of students felt as though their school was supportive of them during the distance learning, so strongly agree with that statement, and 53.6% said they agree. So a pretty significant portion of students said that they felt as though they were supported by their school. This is similar to who is the question for parents about the family dynamics. For the students, it was when they needed help during distance learning, what was the availability of support? And as you can see, about 50% of the students said that there was someone that was able to provide them support during the school day. Then we move into the technology piece. Again, similar numbers to the experiences with the parents. 95.2% of students said they had reliable access to internet and Wi-Fi. 88.5% of the students said they were using their Chromebook, which was issued by the district. And then 49.3% of students said they were using a different district-owned device. In terms of digital literacy, we had 79.4% of the students say they were very confident or confident in using the technology for learning at home. Similar to the parents, we saw a little bit lower number in terms of the confidence level of students in navigating the virtual meeting or class sites for learning at home. And then just feeling supported by their school in the use of technology, 89.9%. And it's important to keep in mind that our technology department set up a web help desk system for parents and students to put in tickets if they had concerns about how their technology was functioning or had questions. And then our tech team monitored that and responded to those needs. So hopefully that had something to do with this number in terms of feeling supported by this school. As we switch over to taking a look at the curriculum and instruction piece, again, you have similar areas and categories for the students to rate. You'll notice here that, again, as Jason referenced, that 46.4% of the students said that they felt as though the interaction with class was satisfactory. And so that's an area that, as we continue to look for planning for the future, an area that we have to address and try to figure out how do we help with that dynamic, knowing that it's challenging in a more distance learning format. But you can see overall the students felt generally supportive of the curriculum and instruction that they were provided, the support that they were receiving, and the access to the materials and resources that they needed to do their work. In terms of communication, students said that they felt that their school's procedures were clearly communicated, 81.3%. 84.6% said that if they had a question, they knew who to contact. And then 83.3% felt that the district staff responded to their questions or concerns in a timely fashion. Again, a pretty positive piece in terms of looking at the fact that students overall felt pretty supported in the communication and getting what they needed when they needed it. And that's the end of that section. Any questions on the student portion?
Pam, is there a breakdown by like elementary, middle school, and high school at all?
The parent.
I just say that because I look at some of the questions and I'm like, yeah, I would answer that differently if I was in high school than I would if I was in 5th grade, perhaps.
Yeah, the breakdown we get is for students to indicate what their school is and for parents to indicate, the schools that their children attend. But we don't get like, this is how Riverview responded versus Washington responded. So we don't get that breakdown. We just get to see how many elementary families responded versus. And generally, I would say, it's hard to tell how much the mix represents our overall. And obviously, we have more parents from Lincoln and students from Lincoln that typically respond because that's a larger population of students. So we didn't pull that forward because there wasn't anything jumping out at us as, oh, we only had elementary parents respond or we only had secondary. We had a pretty good cross smattering of every level. And I do know we can probably assume that at the early elementary levels, parents may have sat with their children and said, how would you respond to this? We don't know.
Yeah. And the other set of questions that I I have to take with a grain of salt, the 95% and the 93% of reliable internet. I have to believe that's somewhat skewed because the survey itself is coming electronically over Wi-Fi, right? And so, if there's that batch of students who, I think you said there were 700 and something responses, the other ones perhaps, that's more telling, right, that we didn't have those respondents. So, and it is what it is. That's the way we do surveys. And I completely agree with that. But I think that skews it. And we have to make sure when we're having conversations about, most of the district has reliable internet, that's not, we can't say that based on that question. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right. And along with that, I think that when you look at the numbers, we're only at about 15% of students who are responding overall and how many we have in our district. So, it's great that for those who responded that we're doing pretty well with our first round of online learning. I think that looks pretty positive. But the real question is, what about the students who aren't engaged or who haven't responded? Those are the ones that I worry about far more than the 50% that are saying, yeah, this is looking pretty good right now. It's those kids who have not taken the survey and families that I'm more concerned about. And I think that, 15%, 700 people looks like, oh, that's a great number, but really 15% of our students, that's really not. So I do have concerns about that. I think I will couple that with saying, I think we did a great job with virtual learning, especially since we got it up and running so quickly. I mean, kudos to everybody who's involved in that, right? But how can we do better? And how are we going to know what that is when we're not getting student engagement through surveys or parents? That's a tough one. So any ideas about that? How we can reach those people? Let me tell you one quick story. Last day of school, our daughter Emma taught at Wilson this year, and last day of school had a student ask her, what day is the last day of school? She literally had, and she lives across the street from her, had attempted over and over again to reach out. No engagement whatsoever since March 12th. And, here she was last day of school asking, when is it done? And, oh, good, I'll tell my dad it's done. Mm-hmm. So those are the people that I worried about most, right? So any ideas from anyone moving forward, how we can engage those kids if I see inevitably go to virtual learning at some point?
I just want to make a clarifying statement around the numbers. The survey, the student survey was not shared with all students because on advice from our partners, they recommended not sending a survey to students in grades K, 1, 2, and 3. So despite the fact that we still would love more input, it does represent a larger number than 15% of respondents.
Okay, good.
Total respondents.
Still a bummer, it's not more, but still a lot better, as you're saying. That makes sense. Yeah.
And I think what I would say about the $1 million question that you're asking, right?
I know, right?
Is that this data was shared with our building leaders as soon as it was completed. Any data, subsequent data that we received, we did another parent and staff survey. That data was then shared with principals. In addition, our student learning office team has really spent time in the last couple of weeks talking about what are the things that we would be having discussions with principals that we would call our fences or non-negotiables. So an example in our distance learning model in the spring, a non-negotiable was those first grade, for example, ELA videos would be shared with all students. That was a non-negotiable. And we've really had some great conversations about what are the non-negotiables in an extended, start of the year extended distance learning model. And we really kind of had some conversations about what are the bodies of evidence that we would look to that show learning is occurring.
Right.
We quickly transition to distance learning. As we all know, we were all thrown for a loop. And we had to get some technology things in place.
Right.
We had to get Wi-Fi access to families that we knew, and all the layers of a lot of things logistics based that we navigated.
Yep.
We have many of those logistical pieces worked through and are better at already.
Mm-hmm.
Those non-negotiables, the fences as we call them, are really centering around how we will support learning, how will we know learning is occurring, and what will we do if learning is not occurring.
Okay.
And we're bringing some additional folks together next week, Tuesday, after the board meeting, to have another round of discussion around those non-negotiables. And then we've scheduled by grade band, though, a meeting with our building leaders to talk about those non-negotiables and the support that our team, our student learning office team, can provide to ensure that they're ready to rock those pieces.
Okay.
So again, July 28th, our student learning office team will gather with some members of technology. We'll finalize those, draft one of those non-negotiables. The following week, we'll share those with principals, get their insights, and we'll keep getting more feedback as a way to prepare our principals and staff to start the year with success, focusing on learning.
Yeah. I do
Jason,
think
I would add in, I think one of the most valuable pieces of that survey was the 48% of the students saying they didn't really have interaction with their classmates. And, from our experience, as a sixth grader, I would echo that heavily at a time when kids were really craving interaction with one another. It just, like I loved our math teachers did similar to what you were saying with the ELA, right? They designated one person to put out some great videos and tutorials, and that was great. And then teachers were available for help, but only if you needed it. And it's almost like, I think kids are kind of craving, I know at 10 o'clock, there's going to be maybe some content, not just if I need help, but a definite check-in and let's go over things instead of what problem do you have, right? And I think the more we can frame it like that so that it doesn't feel punitive to show up at those times, but that it's an incentive to show up at those times because it's exciting to see my friends and my teacher. I think if we can flip that a little bit, that 48% would go up pretty significantly.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if we can have a time period, each of our staff, I believe, should have open office hours that their students can join, whether it means to ask questions or to socialize. I know of teachers who had it every single day for sometimes hours. But I think that every staff member should be required to hold those types of periods for their students, whether it be first grade or up at Lincoln. I think it's vitally important for our students, whether socially or getting answers for things. They always know that during that time period, someone is available to them. And I think if nothing else, even if they never use it, they know it's there. Mm-hmm. So, and parents would know it's there. If we can communicate to the parents, they can join in too. It's there for them to use too. And if they're aware that those teachers are available during that time, I think that would be a positive thing in with our families. So, but I think all staff members should be doing that. I know we've requested it, but I think that should be one of your fences, I think is what you're calling it. I think that would be a really good thing to do.
Those fences are most definitely in draft form.
Okay.
But bullet number one is weekly schedules, assessments, activities will be posted by 8:02 a.m. every Monday for the week, because we heard feedback from parents saying, especially at the secondary level, that geometry, I have this plan, and it's day-to-day sometimes, and this class is day-to-day sometimes. So commonizing and having a schedule that parents and students can draw from will be essential if we are in that distance learning model.
Yep, again. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Any other feedback? Again, this is kind of for informational pieces. Pam and Jason, I'm thinking, I know it's a lot of slides, but I'm almost thinking that the greater board may be interested in seeing that data. Just, you know, I feel like we're kind of privy to that, and they may be interested as we head into the conversation of what fall's going to look like. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I do believe that it's linked in board book for all members of the board. And then I would say that tomorrow, Tiffany and Sarah, who helped Pam and I immensely in the student learning office, will link this slideshow to our website. And Sarah, and they'll also link it. I don't know how they do it, but they do it via Twitter and Instagram, so people can also access it that way. So it'll be available not only to the board members, but to the greater community as well.
That's great.
Great. That'll be great. Okay. So then moving on, we wanted to talk and review about what our school showcase looks like. So I'm not sure who was going to take this one.
Before we even start, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. Looking at Student Showcase, is this something that has been set up previously? Like, I'm new to this terminology. So is this something that's been in existence before? Can you get me up to speed, I guess is what I'm asking.
Absolutely. I think I'm in charge of the intro, so that was part of my plan.
Okay.
So I believe it was 2 years ago that we had a model where schools would be scheduled to present to the board, the full Board of Education. And I think after a number of conversations and watching the model kind of unfold, they were not systematic in their approach. So one meeting, the board might hear about character ed. The next school might do a science showcase. And the next school might talk about math. So our discussions at the Student Learning Office group really wanted to systematize the presentationing or the messaging that the board members could have some expectation of what schools would be bringing. Also wanting to continue to infuse staff and student voice in those presentations, and connect it around some of the hot topics that we talk about. So, for example, last year we systematized the showcase, and we asked buildings to present around a focus on learning, character education, results orientation using data, and their collaborative culture. And I think we did a better job. All leaders did a great job presenting, and the system worked to provide that kind of expected message from building leaders. This represents a half a year, 3/4 of a year of presentations, and our desire to always want to do it differently or better. So this is the formatting is the same, but it's just a revised model that we'd like to share with you tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we always talk about what is the why, what, and how. So that first document that I think Pam had up already it's just an overview for our building leaders, just talking about the presentation model. The showcase, this template here, it goes out to every elementary principal, or I'm sorry, every principal as the template for them to use as they prepare for their showcase.
Nice.
So slide. Shall I keep going, Pam? Sorry.
I can take over from here.
I was
So-
on a roll there. Sorry.
One of the revisions that we talked about for this year was to really allow the board to have an opportunity to get a glimpse at the school action plan. So in the summer, the leadership teams from the building come together and work with their building principals to look through data and really develop an action plan centered around that data. And so we did some tweaks to the showcase to allow you to have a glimpse of those action plans as they kind of work through the year. So the first piece that we're going to ask them to think about as they dig into the data is to really look at, once they pull all that data together, what are the most critical student learning outcome priorities that they're seeing? Keep in mind that they are looking at data on attendance, data on student engagement, there's statewide achievement data in ELA and math, and then also looking at behavior data. And so they're pulling all of that information together. They're taking a look at it by subgroup. So they're looking at how students with disabilities perform compared to students without disabilities. They're looking at the different ethnic groups and seeing how they're performing against their counterparts. They're looking at our English language students and seeing how they're comparing to our non-English language students, economically disadvantaged students to non-economically disadvantaged. So they're taking a look at all of those subgroup pieces and taking that whole picture and then having a conversation as a building team about, as we look at this data, what do we see are the most critical student learning outcome priorities that we really need to address from within our data? And so we ask them to dig in real deep into that data. One of the activities that they will engage in is to start to think about that data and then think about it in terms of what are some of the root causes of what they're seeing in those data trends. And that's going to lead them into a look at what are those teaching and leadership practices that they believe are affecting student learning priorities. And so how are they going to identify some of the things that may be a root cause of the performance of students and address those with some positive teaching and leadership practices that are really going to enhance the student learning and help to address those gaps. I'll let Jason take over with the next piece.
Thank you, Pam. So stemming from that deep data dive and including repeatedly asking why, and then leading to some practices of leadership and instruction, that leads those building groups, leadership and admin groups, to the identification of one or more year-long SMART goals. I think I'm emphasizing year-long because that's part of the revision of our action plan that we hope to bring some completed ones to the group in September. So starting with data, talking about or asking why, leading to some practices, gets those building leadership teams to the conversation and identification of year-long SMART goals.
Jason, I'm not sure everybody knows what SMART goals are.
Yeah.
I think that's some good education ease that we often use that I'm not sure everybody knows.
Yep. So SMART is an acronym that you're going to test my ability to remember every letter. So thank you.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. M is measurable. I remember that part.
Attainable is A.
Yes, good.
T is timely. R is realistic.
Yep.
Yes.
And
What's the S?
S is specific.
Thank you.
Specific. Thank you.
Thanks for the test. I probably got 80% on that one. So again, this is not new to our buildings, right? They create these SMART goals every year. In true educational ease, we talk it as a school learning objective. And those school learning objectives are building wide. And then we ask our professionals at the classroom level to then write student learning objectives that support those goals. So this is not a new process for our building leaders and teams. This part is new, I would say, and we want to do a better job of connecting those SMART goals to our MPSD milestones of success that we've identified, I think, 2 years ago now. And those milestones of success came out of many, many conversations with teachers and teacher leaders and building leaders, really speaking to our emphasis and commitment to the whole child. We have milestones around literacy, milestones around mathematics, student engagement, co-curricular participation, and school to work or school to next, school to military goals. And so we want to just have building leaders and their teams think about, if we're writing one or more SMART goals, how do they tie to our district-based milestones of success? Now, the next slide really is something is new. So our action plans, we ask our building teams to really think of those year-long goals. And then what's new is we've asked them this year to really map out some benchmarks. We say it's 100 days, but it's really semester kind of benchmarks. So we have those year-long goals, and then what are the benchmarks that they can identify at the 100-day mark? So the end of the semester, what would they hope to accomplish that would support the achievement of that year-long goal? And I think one of the things we've seen is our leaders and leadership teams are doing great jobs in the summer of outlining, digging into the data, identifying the goals. But then the minutia of the work happens, and those action plans get set aside. And it's no fault of anyone, but we want to make these action plans alive every day. And part of that planning was creating these 100-day benchmarks, so we can come back at it at the end of the semester, take a pulse check, how are we doing, how do we know, and then the process would be, what's your next 100-day goals? And then the next slide really is kind of a summation of, from the building perspective, what are their key action steps that will get them to the achievement of those 100-day benchmarks and subsequently those year-long SMART goals.
The next piece that we're going to ask buildings to give us an insight into is their plans to engage families. Many of our buildings are title buildings, and so that as part of their requirement for title funding, they are it is a requirement that they provide some enhanced family engagement opportunities. And we felt as though that's just a good practice for all of our buildings. And so we are really tying the work that they're going to do with family engagement around 6 elements that we call the cores of caring model. It's a research-based model that really looks at how do you draw families into the learning community and really make them a part of the viability of that community. And so we're asking them to think about things like how they're providing parenting support for families, communication, taking a look at how they're offering opportunities for families to get involved and volunteer in the school community, how they're providing some resources and guides for families about how to engage their children in learning at home, involving families in the decision-making processes within the buildings as part of that stakeholder input, and then how they're working to collaborate with the community to help provide general support for families, and really helping the families stay connected to the community. And so what we've asked buildings to do is think about 2 of those areas that they really can investigate and dig into and come up with some creative ways to really engage their families in new and unique opportunities as part of the learning community. And then the last 2 pieces are really to get that glimpse that has been historically a pretty exciting part of the board presentations, and that is the voice of the staff. What is the staff saying about how things are going in their building and the momentum their action plan is really taking on in terms of improving student learning and achievement within the building, and then taking a look at it from the lens of students. So getting those voices as a part of that presentation so that you really get a glimpse of the impact that those plans are having. Questions about the presentation?
I have to say, I really appreciate putting out the building goals and letting us know those and having that 100-day check-in. I think that's really critical. We've talked a lot about character development and behavior, and you know, I know that will be within a lot of the building goals. So I'm looking forward to that. I like hearing about the different buildings, but I like knowing what their target is and how they're tackling their target.
I have to say I'm a little, this is kind of negative, but I'm kind of skeptical about the information then that's shared with the board, because I say that because what I have seen from being in the school system for more than 14 years now and in 5 different districts is you tend to have a group of people just like our students and parents who actually are the ones who respond to surveys. We have certain teachers or certain students who will respond to these kinds of questions and come forward or be asked. So I would like to see almost like a, for lack of knowing what else to suggest, almost like a lottery that not just the staff who are willing to come forward and say something, not those who are just asked, but almost on a lottery type basis that staff and students would be approached asking these questions, and that we hear from them from. So because when we always hear from the same teachers and the same students who have those personalities who are willing to come forward, again, I think our data gets kind of skewed that way, and we have a kind of a rosier picture maybe of what things are really like. And I think we need as a district to find ways to encourage and have those comments from people and ideas from people who don't normally give them. You know, more minds are better than few. So that's just kind of my take on it. I know how some of the buildings work, and I know some of the people who are being asked, or those who are willing to come forward, and a group of people who are willing to do those things. So somehow I'd like to see others pulled for those kinds of tasks or surveys, not just this one, but just in general.
And I'm wondering if some of that, you know, we talk about, we get to hear the good, but we never hear the bad and the ugly sometimes at meetings. And I'm wondering if some of that will come out kind of organically as those goals are discussed, because the goals are going to be based on the deficiencies that the buildings are seeing. And so, Kathy, I see what you're saying. When we are in person, there are oftentimes students present during these things. And the last thing I want to do is parade out the bad and the ugly in front of the children who attend that building. And so, right. I think that perhaps that may come out fairly organically through the identification of the goals that are being targeted, because I think it's I think that it's been made clear to the building principals and other leaders that we're not just going to set goals to be fluffy, but we're setting goals to identify issues that need to be worked on. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree completely, because we're never going to get better unless we know what we need to get better at.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, and we've had some of those tough discussions over the past year of, you know, oftentimes we do see bits and pieces that are the great things that people are doing, but what are those struggles and challenges that the buildings are facing, and how do we support them through the district? And I think that is part of the reason the structure has been changed up somewhat for these presentations.
Oh, that's great. I mean, we do need to hear the good stuff too. Face it, we all need to know that there are good things happening in our schools, but we also need to hear from the voices we don't normally hear from. So I just question if there's ways we can go about that would improve that. So
thank you.
There's also linked in the board book. There's a schedule for the school, so I think it's fair to say we just flip-flop the schedule, because this year Jefferson, Monroe, Jackson did not have the opportunity to present, so we put them first. But this is just the schedule for presentationing. We had to double up 1 month, but you'll hear from every building. The members of the board will hear from every building. I think to Meredith's point about kind of organically coming to a point where those goals reflect some of the deficiencies, the Student Learning Office revised the kind of action plans that led to this showcase revision. And we spent time with every building leader going over the action plan before school is out for the summer. Just going line by line, just commonizing our understanding of those action plans. We provided some data dig opportunities just to support that work. And then we have time scheduled in August that our building leaders will bring those completed action plans to the table as a group, grade band group. So all elementary principals, for example, will meet with the Student Learning Office group just to talk through their action plans. So we're working hard to continue or develop this continuous improvement model, and it feels like we're getting better at it every year. And most definitely, part of that continuous improvement model is identifying where there are gaps. And we have gaps, and we know that. Our building leaders are aware of that and are working diligently to have some positive change. But they're aware of the gaps, and we have to embrace those gaps and move forward. That's the only way we get better.
And I would say that the state is providing us with more information to help us find those gaps quicker. You know, a few years back, it was gut instinct, right? We think this group is struggling. We think that group might be struggling. Now the state is collecting so much information from us on our students and on our performance, and giving us that information in a easy way to navigate the breakdown by subgroup, that it really allows our building leaders to be able to dig in with teams and help them look at the changing demographics in their buildings and how those changing demographics may be impacting some of the areas in which they really need to focus their attention. So having that big picture understanding of who's in our building, but then really being able to dig into the needs. And that's something that's relatively new. It's called the WISE system, and they give us an opportunity. The public gets to look at some things through WISE-Public, but there is a school level system that allows building leaders and building teams to really dig into that data and look at those achievement gaps between the different subgroups, look at some of those different performance gaps in terms of behavior and attendance and some of those other factors. And so to your point, Kathy, too, I think we're just getting more tools and getting better at how do we dig into it. So hopefully, as you see those action plans, you'll see evidence of some of those subgroups pieces coming forward, and what did they notice as they were targeting, who is rising to the top as the most critical concern. I think it's important to keep in mind too, they're making some, and the reason we ask them to do it at a building level is because they're making some decisions based upon their school culture and their community as well. And so they have to take that context in as into consideration as they're identifying those key outcomes that they're looking for from students, because we on the outside can look at it and say, well, we think you should do this, but oftentimes they know the dynamics of their building. They know, kind of that history and what they have been focusing on, and who day to day is rising to a level of concern. And so they can take all of that into consideration when they're meeting as teams. So those voices that you're talking about as part of that process are really important. And hopefully you'll see some of that coming through their action planning.
Any other comments on that agenda item? Okay, then the last thing we need to do is to set our schedule. Ideally, what we'd like to be able to do is to meet this same week. And the reasoning behind that is so that if there are things that we need to adjust before the board meeting, informational pieces that we need to get before the board meeting, then we have a little bit of time to be able to do that. So I know we had put this out on Tuesday evenings, and that was a conflict. Would Thursday evenings work at all? Like I don't know, 5:30 or 6, would those work at all for folks during the same week of the month?
I managed to make it work no matter what.
Thank you, Liz.
Hey,
Yeah,
Kathy,
Tuesdays
would that
really,
work for you?
yeah, really Tuesday nights are my only conflict. I've had to,
Okay.
I had to work around the regular board meetings for that, but I didn't want to have to add in another day. So any other day of the
Sure.
week is fine with me. So
Okay.
yeah, unless it's the same night as the board meeting, I'm good with that too. But whatever works for everybody else, aside from another Tuesday.
Okay. So Jason and Pam, does that work for you all? I guess it's the what, 1, 2, 3rd? Is it the 3rd week of the month? I need to look at my calendar. Yes.
We're saying 3rd Thursday of the month.
Yeah. Would that work for you all?
I
Mhm.
believe so. Yeah.
Okay. That sounds good. And then Jason and Pam will just probably have to switch up our standing meeting then a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, we can do that. So, okay, well then we'll look at our next team meeting to be on the 20th of August then. Okay? And does 6 work for everyone?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm only saying that it's my anniversary that night. So make sure y'all remember that and wish me a happy anniversary next month.
Okay, we will do that. You know, when you get to a certain point in life, you get vacuums, silverware, and meetings. So, you know.
Oh boy.
All
Yeah.
right. Anything else that anyone else wanted to bring up? I think that's the end of our agenda. So if someone wanted to make the motion to adjourn, we can go ahead and do so.
okay. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, our meeting's adjourned. It's really
All right.
easy when there's only 3 of us tossing that around. So,
That's right.
all right, very good. Thank you all for coming and staying, and have a good evening.
Yeah, take care. Next month.
You too.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.